Hello, hello, folks. We're just going to wait till the 10:03 mark. Oh, I'm here in PST, but 3 minutes after the hour to get started with our great discussion here, giving folks a little bit of time to trickle on in. But we're excited to chat with you today about all things women in leadership in the CX world. So really excited to join you guys here today. All right, so we're now 3 minutes past the top of the hour, and we see quite a few folks trickling in here. So we're going to go ahead and kick off. But thanks everyone for joining us here today. I'm Sam, and I'll be our moderator here as we go. But I work on our product education team here at Assembled. Some folks may recognize me from our office hours program as well. And so excited to get the chance to be here with all of these frankly badass female leaders to talk about all things leadership and CX and about their journeys. So really excited to be here. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick the ball over to Ashley Pinales for a quick intro, and we'll kind of popcorn around the room and then move on into all of your great burning questions.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. I'm Ashley. I'm the Senior Manager of Workforce Management at Dutchie. I've been in this career field in workforce management for about the last 6 years. Most of my experiences stem from working in e-commerce, logistics, and now SaaS. And I've really enjoyed working in fast-paced environments, helping teams navigate change and substantial growth. I'm going to popcorn to Beka.
Awesome. Hi, I am Beka Swegman. I'm a Senior Vice President of Customer Success at Bark. And I actually have a fun fact that I started my career in social work right out of college and had kind of a crazy career journey, but ended up in startup world in customer success experience and support. So that's mine. And I will popcorn to Lynda.
Thank you. Hi, Lynda Harvey, Director of Customer Support and Account Management with Kin Home Insurance. I have done it all, honestly. I have worked in retail. I have I managed a dental office once. I've done medical recruiting, you name it. I have done it. But really feel like I found a home in customer support and customer service, customer experience / like whatever we're calling it anymore. But really enjoy the work that I do with like building and scaling teams and just really providing the very best customer experience that one can have. Over to you, Rebecca.
All right. So I'm Rebecca. I'm the Senior Manager of Workforce Planning and Insights at Etsy. And I have been in this world of call center management for about 20 years now. But weirdly, I do have a degree in radiology. It was the most boring job in the world. And so whenever people talk about why did they come into the call center world, why did they roll into customer service, and it's really stems from a need to help people and a want to help people and feeling fulfilled in that. And so that's kind of the background of me. And weirdly, random fact, my first job was working on a Christmas tree farm. So I'm managing my family's Christmas tree farm and helping us grow our business. And so no big surprise that that's what I kind of fell in love with and helping my family. And so moving forward from there. So Sam, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Well, with that, just a quick housekeeping reminder before we dive in on this awesome discussion here. And for that quick housekeeping reminder, it's just if you have any questions, please do use our Q&A function. It just allows us to make sure we get to everyone super efficiently. And then we'll, of course, email a recording of the session right after. So be looking out for that. Or for folks that couldn't make it here live today, hello, folks at home. So anyway, diving on in here with our first question, it feels like kind of a natural sequitur from Rebecca's story with the Christmas farm side of things in her youth. But what would you guys say is the thing that led you guys to build your careers in CX and view CX as your long-term home?
So I will build on with that, and I'm going to kind of just jump in. We were talking about this before, that I think there's a relationship to those that go into the medical field because they have a need to help people. And so that's part of the reason I jumped into CX. And then it's also finding that balance of figuring out how to help people, but also throw in that analytical side because that's where my heart is. Amazing. I know I'm workforce, but that big analytical side and being able to enjoy that. And so that's the flip side of it is I think help and analytics thrown together and then creating that excellent service experience. And so I'll let someone else take it.
Well, I can build off of that. So for me, I talked just briefly about maybe, career indecision is what we would call it for me. But I think I was always trying to find my footing, right? I was always trying to look for that thing where I felt fulfilled. And so I did a lot of things. And I always kind of came back to customer service, customer experience. And I was always kind of finding myself there. And the story I kept telling myself was like, well, I'll just do this until I find a real job. Like, I'll just do this. It's fine. It's until I get a real job. And then I started to really kind of recognize that I was having this wonderful impact. I could impact somebody's day and I could impact it for the positive, mostly for the positive. There were some negative ones too, but most of the time it was positive. And I could really kind of like make somebody who was having a really terrible day and turn it into something great at very little expense to myself or to my company, just by providing an incredible experience. And, I don't know what their day looked like. I don't know what was going on. I don't know why they were behaving the way that they were, but I knew how they were behaving when they were finished with me. And then I started to go like, holy moly, this could be a career for me. And that's really when I kind of dug in and doubled down on being in this space and building my career in this space, and also being really personally fulfilled. So, I mean, selfish reasons too, but really that's how I landed here and why I love it.
Awesome. Well, any last comments before we roll on to the next question here, folks? Alrighty, so with that, going to go ahead and turn the page a little bit further down the career journey here. But as a little follow up here, how would you recommend navigating your career for advancement in a world where you're likely to be coming at it from a bit of a minority position, especially being women trying to work our way into leadership roles in a world that can be very male centric? Very curious to hear from the folks here.
I'd love to answer this one. I think like the first thing is like, don't always like get in your head about being the only. It will eat you alive. A lot of time working with male leaders means just formulating your communication style to be most direct and what will be most effective for that audience. When you're approaching a review cycle or going for a job that would be a promotion, speak from data and focus on the language that you use, I think is really what resonates with male leadership and also that VP and, the C-suite level. It just requires that extra little finesse and kind of conciseness.
I would hop in. One thing that I am really passionate about is, as I have honed those skills, don't forget where you came from. And what I mean by that is that you can pass that on. And one of the things that I do when people move into a leadership role underneath me is I teach them how to communicate with me as an executive. And I don't assume that they know I need bullet points. I need it direct. I have insane amount of meetings. And I just think that that's something that is important as you progress in your career, is teaching other people how to do the same. It's specifically what Ashley was talking about, where you go in data driven, direct in your communication, and really clear about the objectives that you're trying to meet. And I would add that it is business. There is always a bottom line. And when you can successfully tie in your conclusions and the things that you're communicating about to the bottom line, that is always on the C-suite's mind. And I think that gives you an advantage, that they can see that you're thinking with vision and globally about the impact of what you do as it relates to the business. And that often will position you for promotion as well.
Awesome. So following up from that angle, this is actually a question that came from somebody in the audience over email. So if that's you, thank you. But very much resonant for this topic. I think often we think a lot about how can we be simultaneously like honest and vulnerable, which is really, really important to a lot of folks, while still projecting that image of strength and leadership quality. And I'm curious how you guys have approached striking that balance of being honest and vulnerable while still giving folks that executive presence.
I love this question. I'm going to jump. Sorry, Lynda.
Oh, it's okay. You go.
I'm going to jump in. This is one of the things that I've had to focus on in my career the most, is being able to find that balance in between that. But it's kind of resonating with what Beka and Ashley said about leaning in with the data. And also, you will find that whenever you approach things with honesty, integrity, and also kind of like Beka said, is approach it with the data set, the quick data set, then you can be very direct and find that balance in between those two things. And also lean into the things that you're good at. Is, for me, it's data. I'm a data-driven person. And so I'll lean into that side of it versus the feelings and the emotions. And that's how I've kind of found that works for me.
Totally agree. And I think the other thing, remembering that honesty is vulnerability as well. And how you can, I think so often we think that being vulnerable is like showing emotions or showing like whatever, but it also can just be a moment of honesty. And it can be this moment of like, I really don't know the answer to that question, but I will follow up. And I think that most people know that you don't know everything. Don't tell my husband, because I do know everything. But the thing is most people expect you to sometimes just not know. And it's okay for you to say, you know what, I am unclear on that. I don't want to give you an incorrect answer. Let me follow up. But then what you have to do is you have to follow up with that. And I think that that's where people also allow you to be vulnerable. But as long as you make good on it. And I think what ends up happening, I think what we think of vulnerability is like, oh, being meek and like whatever, but it sometimes can just be that we don't have the knowledge. But then get the knowledge, do the things and have the knowledge. And then and that also, I think, really builds a ton of credibility as you go forward, because people are like, they're not going to feed me a line. They're not going to make something up. If they really don't know, they're going to come through and know this thing. And I think that's really critical as well. And then I do think, to Rebecca's point, is like, you can be vulnerable without being emotional. And I think that sometimes there's that expectation of us being emotional, which is just such a ridiculous stigma, right? But it also just like recognize like they don't have to go hand in hand.
I can geek out on this topic for a very long time, so I'm going to try to be quick. But I absolutely love Brené Brown's work in this area. If you have not read her books about human emotion. They're just, I personally think they're life-changing, but I think that there is an importance to reading the room. Meaning, if you're in a board meeting, that might not be the time to get emotional. However, if you're on a nonprofit and you're in a board meeting and you're telling a life-changing story, then that is the time to let the emotions show. And so I don't think that, there is a stigma that women are more emotional in the workplace, for sure. But I have had all kinds of people in my virtual office, so to speak, crying over life events, things they're going through. And I don't think the call is for like emotionless leadership. I think the call is for appropriate management of your emotions in the workplace, meaning my direct reports don't need to see me hysterical because something has fallen apart. That's not appropriate from a professional perspective, nor should I come into an executive meeting and lead with only emotion. It's the pairing of emotion and data, because emotion can actually be powerful in getting a point across. If somebody is doing something upsetting, it's actually a disservice to them to pretend like it's not upsetting. And I have had conversations with my employees where I'm like, what you just did made me very angry. I'm not going to take my anger out on you, but I am angry. And I'm going to take a second because it's completely inappropriate what you just did. And we're going to have a pause. And there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. It's when you like lash out, that can be distracting. But I think it also enables you to have conversations that are life-changing for your employees and to be an influential leader. So I think there's a balance there of it's really like the management of emotions where a lot of people get in trouble.
Definitely makes sense. Cool. So turning the page here, what advice would you give to an agent that's trying to make that first time leap into people or perhaps program leadership?
So this one is like my favorite question of all time. So first of all, like, get thicker skin. You have to have thick skin. And I would say this to anybody, whether you're female or male, like, get thicker skin, because you are entering into a position when you go into any kind of growth, like, is uncomfortable, right? But anytime you go into managing people, it's important for you to have thicker skin, because I promise you, not everybody's going to like you. And if you are somebody who's going to get sucked into that and have your feelings hurt every time somebody talks behind your back or does something or tells you a thing you don't like to hear, you're going to fall apart. So get thicker skin. Also, learn how to hustle. I think I was making the analogy the other day, like, new managers are kind of like new parents. Like, you step in and you're kind of like, what do I do with this? And it's just like really overwhelming. And like, you have to make a lot of mistakes and you have to kind of stumble through things. And so you've got to learn how to hustle. And I think I could probably speak for the group and say, like, none of us told us all of these things. These are like, it's over experience. And we may have had really great mentors who've helped us, but there are things that we had to learn. And I can't tell you how many times someone's like, do this thing. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like Googling, like, how do I do the thing? Right. Thank you, YouTube. So just like, you've got to get scrappy, and you've just got to learn how to hustle and like figure out the things that you don't know.
I think also like recognizing like you're going to fail, but that means you're trying. Like, there's so many like epic failures that I actually make a list. I'm like, okay, like, because in that moment, it's like the world is ending. I'm a horrible person. I shouldn't be in this role. And that's when the imposter syndrome really starts to seep in. And you just have to like push it aside and be like, you know what? I'm failing forward because I'm trying something new. I'm putting myself out there. And that is, I think, like one of the most the hardest lesson I ever had to learn was like, all right, I'm doing something new. I'm going to fail, but I'm going to get incrementally better. And so like my motto is like 1% better every day, whether that's, reading Simon Sinek or Brene Brown or, watching like TED Talks with like Carla Harris, like you just have to keep trying, because that discomfort is where the change happens and where you're going to learn the most.
And I can't resist stepping in on this one, as it's being kind to yourself. Is I am by default a perfectionist. I want it to be 100% right 100% of the time. And it's being kind to yourself. It's much like you said, Ashley, is learning that it's okay to fail. It's also that you don't have to be perfect in the way that you present yourself. You don't have to be 100% perfect, but it's all those things that we talked about before, is being vulnerable, being open, being honest. It's all of those things that we talked about as the qualities that we're looking at in a many times male dominated world.
Definitely. All great points, folks. So turning page here once again, kind of flipping perspectives on the question almost. When you're interviewing an agent looking to make that first time jump into leadership, what are the qualities that you're looking for? How can they come in and really ace that interview?
I actually used to be an agent, and that's actually how I got my job into WFM. And what I think like my interviewers looked for at that time and what I look for now is I look to see if they're doing the job they're in well. Are you already succeeding? How are you influencing your peers? Are you showing up, and how are you showing up? And also, are you taking advantage of the programs that the company you're at might have? So, for example, like we had floor walking opportunities, we had like management programs to help people get into that next step and get into that mindset and learn from our leaders. Are they going for those programs? Are they willing to adapt to maybe an unpopular business decision, and are they championing that for their team? I think all of those things are really important, and there are a lot of unpopular decisions as managers that we have to make or are coming top down that you have to communicate to your team. So how do they navigate those things? How do they get going when the going's tough?
Awesome. Thanks. Great responses, everybody. Cool. So on a similar note, let's say we're talking now about someone that's looking to make that career jump from existing manager perhaps to a more senior role, like a senior manager, or that first step into more of a director or VP kind of role. Would that change anything about what you'd be looking for versus that first time people leader, and what might that be?
Absolutely. For me, there are avenues for growth that I think stand out when you're thinking about senior leadership. I think the primary thing that I'm looking for is vision, and healthy, holistic perspective on the organization, to make it really tangible. When I think about somebody's ready to lead a team that potentially is like giving product feedback, I'm looking for somebody who doesn't just react to customers, who can take a customer's feedback, who puts numbers to it, who can summarize that feedback, and who can then look to translate it in a way that it's actionable for an engineering or a product team. So a lot of times, in the entry level roles, we're trained to react, / respond to customers, and the customer's always right. When you're trying to translate that to an engineering team, most engineering teams think the customers are never right. So it's just out there, right? They like our customers, but they are trained to build these things for customers. And so, especially in the tech world, being that middle person and having vision to understand the global vision for where the software is headed and manage the tension between what a customer wants and the validation of what work can get done on an engineering side is really, really important for me when I'm looking for somebody that can handle senior leadership.
My thing I'm looking for is coming in as I've moved into that role and I've kind of stayed in that like mid to senior level for quite a while now. And something that as I've gained people under me that are moving into those roles as well, I'm looking for how can they look at the bigger picture, not just look at their one piece of what they're doing, is looking at that big picture of all of the pieces involve everything else. Is just being on the workforce management side is many times we can get very head down on, oh, we've got to hit this SLA or we've got to hit budget. But then there's a whole separate side of quality portion. It's, can the training team bring in the information that we need? Can everyone bring in all of the information that we need? And then it's also bringing in and being able to communicate what is that big picture and the final result that's going to happen. And that's not even getting into the, what Beka was talking about is the engineering side of a new project, being able to break it down for engineers in their terms as well.
That totally makes sense. So, switching gears here once again. So, let's say I am an agent that one day would like to be a senior leader at my company. What kinds of roles should I be looking to move into? And just as a kind of context for the question, something I've heard from a lot of agents in my time is, does it matter if I go more of an operational or workforce track or more of a qualitative and people leader track if eventually I'm trying to get to that more upper level holistic leadership point? So really curious to hear from the folks here what kinds of roles you would recommend folks consider moving into if they're curious about a long-term senior track in CX.
Something I did when I was first starting out and kind of like, putting together like a vision board of like what I wanted from my career was I would actually go through like job postings on LinkedIn for like literally any type of posting, whether it was like in product, engineering, whatever. And I would actually take things from those roles that I was like, oh, this could be interesting. Like I might want to do that. This is intriguing to me. Like, how can I, build my resume to those things? I think like kind of getting that and seeing like, okay, what am I actually drawn to? What do I want to do first is really important. And then going through like the roles that might be open or that you're applying for and think like, okay, I can get these skills to get to this, dream state by adding value here. I think that's like something I found really effective and still do.
Yeah, I think that's so great. I think LinkedIn, I stalk so many people on LinkedIn. It's embarrassing, but there's so much to learn. I would say that fundamentally, you need to understand where it is that you want to go, and then really ask yourself, why do I want to go there? I think so often I talk to younger professionals who are like, well, I just want to go there because that's where the big bucks are. And I'm like, okay, like I get it. Financially, we're all motivated, but also like there's a lot of stuff that you've got to go through. And although, you may want that flashy title, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that you have to be, ready to take on. And again, it has to be personally fulfilling for you. So if you want to be the VP, just because you want the VP and you want like the title and the money, that may not be the right fit. So it's really important for you to understand, like, why is it that you want to go that way? What are you going to get out of it personally? Because you have to put up with a lot of crap to get to those points. You have to do a lot of 70-hour weeks, and you have to do a lot of like emotionally talking people off of the ledge, like a lot. So I think it's really important to understand, like, why is it that you want to go that direction? And does that like really fit your skill set? The other thing I would say, and I think the mistakes that people make is they throw their hat in for every position. They're like, I just want to grow. I just want to grow. you cannot grow, number one, until you've become the master of your position. So please don't try and grow until you can confidently say you have mastered your position. Once you have mastered your position, then it's time to grow. And you really need to be thoughtful about the way that you go forward and do that. Don't just throw your name at everything. Just so you know, we can all see it. We all see how many positions you've applied for. And if you've applied for 10 different departments, that shows the leaders that you just want out. And I don't want to hire somebody who just wants out. I want to hire somebody who intentionally wants to grow into those positions.
I gotta hop in on this one too. I think also being open, not being rigid in how you get somewhere. I know Lynda spoke to this at the beginning, but I've also had the experience of taking a role that I didn't really know where it was going, but I knew I could do it. And I felt excited about it at the time. And there's also those moments in your career. And I'll just tell a personal story is the way that I ended up in senior leadership at my current company is I was actually in the startup world, early stage startup, and Bark was not an early stage startup, but they were hiring. And I was so passionate about their mission that I told the hiring director, I will start at the bottom. I don't care. I'll work my way up. I know it's a huge pay cut for me. I don't care. I want to be a part of what you're doing. And I did not know this at the time, but that leader was actually in the process of transitioning to another role. And so I got a call from the CEO 2 days later asking me if I would actually come lead the department. And so you never know. That was a genuine moment for me of like, I genuinely was going to start at the bottom and work my way back up, even though I had been in leadership roles before. And so I guess my point in that is like, really be humble and be hungry, and opportunities will present themselves as you go throughout your career. And you may actually end up somewhere you didn't expect to, and to be open to that. Again, like Lynda said, oh, I'll do this till I find my career. And then your eyes open one day and you're like, oh, actually, this is amazing. I'm doing great. And so that would be my plug for also keeping your options open, not applying for everything, but keeping your eyes open.
That totally makes sense, and appreciate the perspectives here, ladies. I would actually love to double click really quickly on something Lynda mentioned there. Lynda, you mentioned in there that something that you're looking for out of that person before they move on to that next role is seeing that they've had mastery in their current role. And before you move on, you should really think to yourself, like, am I doing my current role to the best of my ability? So something I'm really curious about, what would you say are signs that you've mastered a role and are perhaps ready to continue growing?
Well, since I said it, I guess I should answer, right? I think a lot of times when things become almost just pure muscle memory, right? When it becomes pure muscle memory and we can respond or we can do without feeling challenged, right? These are, our normal activities. I think we're always challenged in all of the things. But it comes to like when it becomes almost just like old hat, or it becomes like so easy for us to do. And that's what I found when I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm ready to move on because I'm craving these new challenges. I'm craving these new opportunities. And sometimes, to be honest, sometimes you may not have an opening to go to right at that time. And then that's when I think you start to like create new opportunities and you start really enhancing your position and enhancing your job and doing all of those things. Not because you're bored, because we can get bored, but it's about that these tasks or these things are not challenging any longer, or they are that kind of muscle memory where we're just kind of going through the motions. And that's when I think you can really say that you are a master of your position. And that's when you start to say, okay, I'm ready to take on more because I can do all of these things. I can do these things well. And now it's time to move on. But with this caveat, the other thing is like, a master of their position may not always be like the top, most stellar, amazing stat turning in person ever either. It's somebody who can do their job well. They're meeting the expectations, often exceeding the expectations, and doing those things. I tell people all of the time, like sometimes the worst thing you can do is take your star agent and slap a manager title on them, because they're really good at this one thing. They may not be good at this. Oftentimes, I think I found when you promote from within, your managers from within, they're often good performers. You're not going to promote someone who's a terrible performer. They're a good performer, and they do their job well, and they're ready. They have the aptitudes and talents for all the things. But it's not always, they may not always be like the top 1% of your performers. But again, just thinking about, am I doing my job the very best that I can? Is it become muscle memory? And can I say, like, in good faith, yes, I'm a master of my position?
That completely makes sense. All right, so moving on to another really great question from the crowd here. What's the best advice you've received that has contributed to your success today?
Feedback is a gift. It is the gift that keeps giving, no matter if you want to hear it or not. I think sometimes you have to take it with a grain of salt, but I remember having a retail manager tell me that. And that's just something that's always stayed with me, really being receptive to performance reviews or feedback and just like sitting with it for a moment and thinking, okay, like how can I enact this? What can I, like, do I need to change something in what I'm doing in my approach? Just really taking feedback for what it is, because you're always going to get it.
I've already said it a couple times, but it's leaning into what you're good at. For me, it was leaning into that data side and accepting that, hey, I chose radiology in school because it was angles and I love math, but lean into that and become a high performer in that. And then add on the things that challenge you beyond that basic skill set. And so it's leaning into what you're good at, but then it's also taking what you're really good at and expanding from there. And so honestly, I used to be highly introverted and not talk hardly ever. Like this would have terrified me. And this is something that, I've learned to spread my wings and move forward from that.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys. So, again, turning the page into another question, and I particularly love this one from our audience. As a male frontline manager of agents, what can I do to help facilitate my female employees' career growth and be there for them?
I think asking that question is the first step, right? Like I think just being aware, and keeping it on the forefront of your mind. But I think again, it's treating them fairly, and helping them with their opportunities. I think that it's fostering anyone's growth. I think it's less about like male and female, and I think it's just about like making sure you're having those open conversations. But I think a lot of times, advice I think I wish I would have gotten when I was younger, I know I would be grateful for this, is like make sure that when you're guiding them, when they're bringing you problems, that you're guiding them towards being solution oriented. So don't come at me with problems. Feel free to mention the problem, but come at me with solutions. And I think that so often I expected early in my career, I would bring problems and I'd look at them and be like, what are you going to do about it? Right. But I think it's really important to guide people to be solution oriented, and always to quantify the data. Right. I think that so often we go with our gut feeling and we can't quantify that gut feeling. And I think it's about just guiding your employees like, hey, as you're coming at me with solutions, make sure you're quantifying it, the solution too. Like if you have a solution that helps 1% of our customers, that's awesome. And we should do that. But if you can come at me with a solution that helps, 60% or more of our customers, that's going to be something that really kind of goes to the forefront. So just guiding your people to really, just be solution oriented, data oriented. And again, asking yourself, are we treating our female employees and our male employees, or is it fair and equitable for all?
I have two very specific ones for any men in the crowd. One, and I wish I could tell more men this, but one is the moment when your female employees come back from maternity leave. You can lose some incredibly hardworking women in the way that you handle that transition back to work. And I think that the advice and the encouragement that I would give is just to understand that that woman is going through massive transitions with how to balance an addition to the family, and especially if that child is still feeding off of that woman, that it's just emotionally a big transition time. And I think that you don't have to go overboard, but checking in on those employees as they're transitioning back, giving them space and validating them as a valuable employee, it actually goes a really, really long way in that probably 1 month where it's very difficult getting your schedule back to a normal schedule and getting your productivity up. So I think that's one thing that's amazing that some male leaders have done to support women in business. And the other one is for executive male leadership, if there are any on this call. One of the things I really appreciate about our CEO is women historically have been less likely to advocate for pay and for pay raises, for competitive pay. It is just something that we don't do boldly and with confidence in a lot of our conversations. And one of the things that he did when I was first coming on, I advocated for what I thought was fair based on research. And he told me that I was underselling myself. And he said, try again and don't undersell yourself. And it made me laugh, but I did go back and I came back and we landed at a higher point. And there are not many people that would do that, but I have never done that again. I have been more aggressive and more confident. And that was a leader, that was a male leader that challenged me. I won't say his exact words, but he essentially challenged me to play with the big boys and come in with confidence. And I've never struggled with that since. So there are moments like that where you can gently encourage and provide some grace as well.
This opens up another very interesting talking point, especially in a world where I actually don't think this is the latest updated figure, but as the bumper sticker says, 76 cents on the dollar for ladies versus men in the workplace. So a very topical question here. But beyond that, do you guys have any advice for navigating the pay negotiation question when you're at that step in an interview process?
So I will say for me, it is coming with the data. I keep on going back to that. It's coming with the data and researching and knowing your value and what it's worth. I know as a senior workforce manager with the amount of experience that I have, I know what that's worth. And I also know what I'm bringing to the table. On the flip side, you also have to be able to communicate that vision of what can you bring to the table as well. If you can't communicate that, all the data in the world does no good. And that was really bad English. And so this is me speaking randomly. But bluntly honest, you have to be able to communicate the vision of what can you bring, but also know what it is that you're looking for and navigating that conversation toward that. And as I've recently changed companies. I've moved to Etsy in January. So I just went through this, and there were some companies I told no because I knew my value.
Major snaps to that. There's a lot of power in owning your no, for sure. So moving on to the next question here. This is actually another one from our audience. So hello. Thanks for submitting if this is you. How do you give feedback to male coworkers that are difficult to work with, i.e. around things like poor communication, gender issues, things like that, if at all? What advice would you give for navigating those kinds of interactions?
I'd say have specific examples. Not talking from a place of like, I feel this. Say like, hey, in this situation where X, Y, and Z happened, I'd appreciate it if you did, like having those hard conversations. I'd appreciate if you did this instead. Can you back me up here? I think like one of my favorite leaders, and how she phrased hard conversations is, this is the situation. This is how it made me feel. This is my ask from you. And being okay with asking for something in return, and putting it in their court, not assuming that they are intentionally interrupting you or that they're intentionally like shutting down your ideas every single time. Maybe they are, but you don't know until you have that first conversation and kind of like know the way of like know the land first, is my biggest piece of advice.
I think the other thing you always should do with any feedback, but especially when it comes to a difficult conversation, asking the person if they're open to receiving some feedback. Because if you're coming at somebody with feedback and they're just going to shut you down because they're not open or they're unwilling, so, hey, I've got some feedback for you. You're open for some feedback, and allowing them to open that door for you, I think is really, really critical. And then I think it's also okay to really preface with like, hey, I want you to know that this is going to be some uncomfortable feedback, or this is going to be a difficult conversation. I'm uncomfortable too, but we're going to get through it together. We're going to talk about it together. So I think it's also okay to really preface that. And it sets the tone. I don't know if you can tell, I tend to be a little tongue in cheek, a little funny, all the things. And so sometimes it can be difficult to tell if I'm being sarcastic or not. And so what I have found for myself is like, number one, I ask, are you open to the feedback? And number two, like, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable, or this is going to be difficult feedback to give. And then just get it over with. Don't beat around the bush. Just get to the point. And don't do the compliment sandwich. I really like this, and then hide that garbage in the middle. Like, just get it out.
I think it's also important to remember in the back of your mind that the goal of feedback is not to change the other person, because you can't change people. If you're not married, that's a great way to figure out you can't change people. No, I have a wonderful husband, but we joke about that, right? Like if you're coming with feedback and your heart is focused on like, how can I change you because of how you're impacting me? It's actually selfish. It's not the same as a boundary. A boundary is saying, you are affecting me in this way, and I'm either going to be here for it or I'm going to leave when you choose to behave this way. And being really clear about what you will and won't do. And I think a lot of us make that mistake where we go and we provide feedback with the intention of like, and now you should change this. But understanding that people have free will and that you can't change someone is also really important, because that guards a lot against the frustration of having to give feedback more than once, which, by the way, you will. If you have a difficult relationship at work, you will have to work on it. It's not like a one and done and then you're great and it's all gravy. Those difficult relationships, when you can frame them up as like, this has been put here to grow me, not to grow you, to grow me. And I'm going to focus on how I can grow in the context of this very difficult and challenging relationship. You will come out of it a better person. And you can also impact change in that person's life just by being yourself and being clear about your boundaries and who you are. And so that would be my advice. You'll have a lot of very, very frustrating moments if you try to change the people around you.
Feedback is the gift that keeps on giving, sometimes even to ourselves. With that, turning the page actually over into full live Q&A mode for the last 10 minutes or so here. We'll be answering questions directly from the folks here in the audience, live and in person. So if you have any questions you'd like us to chat out live, please take a moment to drop them into the questions button there, and then we'll be tackling some of these live on the fly here now. Luckily, we do have a nice little repository of a few that have come in, so I'll go ahead and kick us off with some of these, but don't be shy. Feel free to drop in any questions using the question button below. Ooh, a really great one from Susan over at Imperfect Foods. How do I get thicker skin? I understand why I need it, but how do I work towards that?
So that was my saying, so I'll talk to it. So a lot of it is you have to decide how much you're going to let in, right? And I think the further you go up in leadership, there's a lot of things that get thrown at you kind of constantly. And it's kind of building this wall, which is really funny because we talk about being vulnerable and all the things, but there is kind of a wall that you have to put up, and you have to decide like what energy you're willing to accept. And so, the thing that I see most younger managers or newer, I shouldn't say younger, newer managers. So what I see with newer managers is they're so concerned about everybody liking them, right? We're so concerned. And the thing is like somebody's opinion of you is none of your business. So if you go about like, okay, you don't have to like me. We have to respect each other. We have to work together, but we don't have to be BFFs, right? We don't have to be. And I think that's where you start. You really start like deciding like how you can distance yourself from those feelings. And that's how you start to develop thicker skin. And I think that then that boils into the feedback that you get at work. And we've talked a lot about that. The feedback's not there to attack you. The feedback is there to hopefully help you improve, right? And so if you continue to let like all of that energy like seep in, it's gonna kill you. So that's where you start to just kind of like have to separate yourself. There are resources out there like that are by much, much smarter people than me. There's a book, I'm not going to finish the title, but it's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a. Google will fill it in for you. Excellent book to start if you're not quite sure how to like distance yourself.
I think too is, as a recovering people pleaser, highly anxious person, all those things, I think that realizing that there are 1,000 perceptions of you. Everyone that you come across might have a different perception of you, and letting that go. You are not going to please everyone. Everyone is not going to necessarily know who your true self is or your true motivations. There's a book called The Untethered Soul, which really changed my life. Again, like what Lynda said, you have to let it go, whether that means like you have what I call my friends, the board of directors, like having that safe space to, vent out those things or, things like that, like things that happen in the workplace. Try to take it there. Try not to leave it at work and project it at work. Bring it somewhere else. Have a moment. If you need to cry, cry. There are plenty of moments where I do that too. It's like, take a breath and then just keep moving forward.
Awesome. Love that. All right. So next up, what kind of data or personal metrics do you think are most valuable to provide when having the I want a promotion or title change conversation?
I could speak to this one. I have a lot of direct reports. And one of the things that I tell people to do, because most people don't do this, is actually to keep a record of your accomplishments throughout the year. Because when you go to that annual review and you try to recount the things that you've done, it is very difficult if you have not kept good records. And specifically records that are tied to metrics. So it's not enough to say, oh, I have excellent customer relationships. I'm going to say, by what metric? Like, show me. What does that mean? That's anecdotal. That I can't do anything with that. I can't put it on paper, right? So come with a CSAT, come with an NPS score, come with your renewal rate, and come with those things that you have done over the course of the last year. If it is prior to like an annual review, I also say, again, like come with the data. Make sure that you're documenting don't assume that leader knows everything that you do. And because I guarantee you they do not. And document not only what you've accomplished, but what you do and how your role was and how it's grown. And then come with the public data about what the industry pays for how your role has grown. Does that make sense? Yeah. And all of those things will help you be successful in asking for a pay difference, for a promotion, and also not freaking out if they say not yet about a promotion, but it might be coming. You can still ask for a pay raise and not a promotion, by the way. So based on your job duties expanding. So that's what I would say is usually great. If you're not a record keeper, start now, because that is how you have those conversations.
When looking for a new role, what are green flags, so to speak, when looking for a role that you'd like to apply for?
I'll take this one. I think it leans into what skill set are you looking for. I'm also looking for a company that offers employee benefits. Like I'm looking at the benefits that they offer to promote a work-life balance. One of the things that I will say about Etsy that is public knowledge is that we have a great employee benefits package. And that was one of the things that was on the listing that it brought up, because it told me that it promotes that work-life balance.
Oh no, it looks like we might have accidentally lost Rebecca. Anyone else would like to take a stab at this question before we turn the page to the next one?
I'd also say, like, does the company values align with like your personal beliefs? I think that's really important to recognize and to make sure that this is the right company for you too.
Absolutely. And then one last question here before we close out. And don't worry, folks, we'll be providing individual contact info for everyone here if you have any last burning questions. But what are some trainings you would recommend? And included under this would be like things like books, TED Talks, courses, anything of that nature that you would recommend to folks.
I think Beka hit it right on the head. Anything Brene Brown. There's also this really great book that a VP recommended to me recently, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. And then also Own Your Greatness is a really good one. Yeah, and there's one TED Talk specifically. I mentioned Carla Harris, and it's about the importance of having like sponsorship. And she also has a great book. Those would be my go-to recommendations.
Hey, Sam, can I kind of, I want to tack on, but there was one question that really I feel passionately about. It was do you recall any biases or assumptions made about you as a female in the workspace?
Feel free to fire away.
All right. I know we have 60 seconds.
Last minute.
But I just want to say this because I've heard so many women ask this, and I just want to say to you, I could be right or wrong, but here's my approach. Who cares what they're saying about you behind your back? Like literally, who cares? You will chase your tail trying to figure out what assumptions and what biases. Bias is in everybody. If you try to track down every bias and fight it, you're going to be shadow boxing for your entire life. And so I would just say, let it go. Deal with anything that is like front and center, right? So if it comes up and it's affecting your ability, I tell my employees all the time, if it is affecting your ability to do your job, that's the only time you address it. Otherwise, let them be in their biased world and have a happy life, and you do you, truly, because you will absolutely exhaust yourself, because I'm sure, assumptions about all of you lovely people that I have made from 5 seconds of knowing each other. And that's another topic of like why we do that as humans, right? But it's actually helpful for us. And so, yeah, that would be my quick. I just feel so passionately about that because I spent so much of my earlier career shadowboxing what people might maybe be thinking or biased or how that's going to impact me later on. And I just say, just deal with what's in front of you and keep going forward.
Wow, Beka, major snaps to that. A serious powerhouse answer to wrap up our Elevating Women in CX panel. So thank you so much for piping in here at the end. That's amazing. And with that, I'll go ahead and screen share back on over to our contact information for any folks that might be interested in following up after the panel. So thank you guys so much for joining us here today for this discussion. I hope everyone found it as valuable as I certainly did. And then for contacting our panelists here, you can find all of us on LinkedIn. So be looking out for us there. And we'll, of course, shoot out this recording here momentarily. So looking forward to connecting with any interested folks after the call today. And as always, Assembled is here for you guys if you have any questions at all. So with that, have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and catch you guys around the block.